If you're jumping into The Witcher 3, whether it's your very first time or you're coming back after bouncing off it years ago, this beginner's guide is to help you actually get into the game this time. The Witcher 3 can definitely feel overwhelming at the start. The game is gigantic from its exploration to its story, and the systems don't always explain themselves well. I know this as well as anyone, as I had dropped the game before as well, before it finally clicked with me. So today, I wanted to break down the game's core systems in the simplest way, and provide you with some general tips so you come into the game with a bit of a foundation to get started. Also, if you enjoy this type of content, please consider subbing to the channel and dropping a like, and without further ado, let's get right into it. If there's one thing The Witcher 3 gets right from the get-go, it's the absolute scale and immersion of its world. The game is cut into three main regions: Velen, Novigrad, and Skellige. The first region after the beginning area of White Orchid will be Velen, and yes, it's massive. You open up the map and see markers popping up all over the place, and you may feel like you'll miss out on something huge if you don't go and see every unique icon. But The Witcher 3 isn't just some Ubisoft-style checklist open world. The greatest things you'll discover will come from what isn't marked. This could be simply stumbling across a ruined fort with hidden lore, finding an old woman who lost her frying pan, or rummaging through the loot left in an underwater cave. The game does have fast travel points, which does make exploration easier once you discover those waypoints, but you can't just teleport anywhere from will. You'll need to actually get to those fast travel points, known as signposts, in order to fast travel, which adds to the game's groundedness in a great way. It may seem annoying at first, but it encourages you to stay in the world and explore it for yourself, which will make you stumble upon random encounters along the way. In terms of what to explore, I'd straight off the bat recommend to pretty much go to any exclamation mark icons you see on the map, as these usually indicate the game's side quests, which are all incredible, with some of them even being better than some of the main quests in the game. Some of them will spiral into multi-part stories that truly add to the game's world building, and many of these will stick with you just as much as the main story. Other than that recommendation, I'd honestly say don't worry too much about clearing the game's areas zone by zone, as the game really works best when you just bounce around from its regions. It's alright if you go from Velen to Novigrad to Skellige and vice versa, and it's actually pretty natural as that goes with the flow of the story. Just follow the game's main questline and dabble in its side quests naturally as you stumble upon them. I'd also recommend, especially in closed spaces, to use Geralt's Witcher senses often, as you'll be able to highlight certain loot and herbs that'll be useful to you along your journey. One last thing I'd like to say is to be ready for the game's abundance of random encounters, because just like games like Red Dead Redemption 2, The Witcher 3 has plenty of these. You'll be peacefully riding along a trail and hear sudden cries for help as a helpless old woman is surrounded by bandits, or see a beast circling a body. It's these unscripted moments that add to the feeling that this huge open world is really lived in, and often you'll find some of these can even lead to new gear or side quests. So overall, I think just don't be afraid to stop and check things out as you explore, but don't feel like you have to look at everything on the map, as the best way to explore The Witcher 3 is truly by going along with the game's pacing itself. Now, this is a point of contention that makes many people fall off the game entirely, even if everything else seems incredible. Combat in The Witcher 3 can admittedly feel pretty clunky at first. If you're used to more fast-paced action games or modern hack-and-slash mechanics, the early fights in this game can feel a bit stiff, but I promise that it does get better. Geralt isn't meant to be a tanky brute who trades hits, but is a mutant monster slayer who's been able to compete with the best through his preparation, positioning, and fast decisive strikes. Now let's start with the basics. You've got two swords in The Witcher 3. A steel one for humans and other humanoid creatures, and a silver one for monsters. The game will automatically equip the correct one for you depending on the enemy that you're facing, so you don't have to stress about that. But what you definitely need to focus on is dodging and parrying. There's two types of dodging in The Witcher 3. One that's a simple sidestep in whatever direction you want, which for me personally was the main one I used for avoiding all types of enemy attacks. However, there's also full-on rolling, which can definitely be more useful for getting out of the attack radius of larger monsters or spells. Parrying, on the other hand, is key when you're fighting other humans, as if you time it right, you'll be able to deflect their attack and counter, which will give you an opening, which is pretty standard as action games go. That's pretty much the basics of the controls and whatnot of The Witcher 3, but one of the most important aspects of the combat is for sure the sign system. Now, signs are basically a witcher's simple magic abilities, and they're kind of going to be essential in being able to take down all types of enemies. There's 5 of them in total. Ard, which is a telekinetic blast that blows back enemies, Igni, which is a fire burst, Quen, which gives you a one-shot healed, Yrden, which slows enemies in a radius, and Axii, which is basically a mind-controlling spell. Now, if you're playing the game for the first time, I recommend defaulting to Quen. That extra hit of protection around you can honestly save you in many of the game's fights, especially especially early on when you're still getting used to the rhythm of the whole system of dodging and parrying. Once you get this, you'll probably be using all types of other spells, especially as some monsters and enemies will be more affected by certain signs than others. You'll also notice that Geralt's got a stamina system. Now, stamina directly plays into the usage of signs, as casting any sign costs stamina, and if you spam the roll button or run away in combat, you'll drain it. The game does really reward you for pacing yourself, so I recommend getting a hit in, doing a sidestep or two, hitting again, and so forth. It's very much like a dance rather than a complete button mashing fest. Now, the last tip I'd like to give you in regard to combat, which specifically applies to fighting monsters, is that you should always try and read the bestiary. Now, the bestiary is where you have a glossary of all the monsters that you've fought, and a little checklist of their weaknesses and their behavior. I'd take 10 to 15 seconds to read through each one when you can, as it really can make a difference in combat when you know exactly what sign or oil to use. Now, the last related thing I'd like to quickly touch upon is the abilities or skill tree of the game. As you level up, you earn skill points that will let you unlock new abilities across several skill trees, those being combat, signs, alchemy, and general. However, unlike other games with skill trees, there's a bit of a catch here. You can only equip a certain amount at once, so that means even if you unlocked a certain skill, it doesn't necessarily do anything until you slot it. Early on, I'd recommend trying to stick to one tree or style as much as possible, so a sword focused build with the combat tree, a sign focused build with the signs tree, etc. Also, as you level up, you'll begin to unlock several mutagen slots, which basically give you passive stat boosts like bonus health or sign intensity. Now, these mutagens are usually looted by defeating monsters, so you have plenty of these as you build your character. I recommend trying to not overthink this system and just going with the flow, as if you ever do change your mind, you can respec your entire build later on using a certain potion. To sum it all up, The Witcher 3's combat isn't all about being fast-paced, but it's really about preparation and patience. And once you get into that sort of Witcher mindset itself, the game's combat begins to feel incredibly rewarding. I think in many ways, this section kind of goes hand in hand with the last. A lot of people, including myself, will for the first few hours or even for an entire playthrough, ignore the potions and alchemy systems of The Witcher 3. But honestly, the potion system in The Witcher 3 is a core part of Geralt's identity as a Witcher. And once you start getting into learning the system and brewing them yourself, it's a super rewarding gameplay loop. Potions, like most games, are consumables that give Geralt temporary buffs, from faster health regen to increased damage and so much more. You'll only be able to drink a potion in combat if you've equipped them beforehand, so make sure to always do this before any major fight in the game. You get formulas and recipes through just finding them around the world, and once you've got those, you'll just need to get those ingredients to craft them from the alchemy menu. Something that's great though is that once you craft a potion once or for the first time, you won't need to keep making it. That's because every time you meditate, as long as you've got alcohest in your inventory, which is a fairly common material, you'll regenerate those previously made potions. If that feature wasn't in the game, I'd also not bother with the potions, but now by making potions, you'll pretty much have them for the rest of the game. There's many potions across the game, but early on you want to stick to Swallow, which gives Geralt a steady stream of health regen during combat, and it's going to be a lifeline in fights, especially on higher difficulties. There's also Thunderbolt, which gives you extra attack power, so you also want to keep that handy. However, there is a trade-off with potions. Every time you drink one, you'll get a stat called Toxicity added to a toxicity meter. Now, if that meter gets too high, Geralt will start to take damage and hallucinate, so you definitely have to choose which specific potions you'd like to use, and popping all of them while in combat just really isn't an option. This section might be the most overwhelming of all to some. As you play The Witcher 3, you'll constantly loot new weapons and gear from bandits, chests, or monster nests. But the truth of it is that you'll probably not be using any of this random gear, as it's best to just sell or dismantle it. That's because what really matters in terms of the game's gear, specifically from level 10 onwards, is the Witcher gear. Now, the Witcher gear sets in this game are a special category of weapons and armor tied to the different Witcher schools, like the Griffin or Cat set. They aren't just super cool looking, but they scale with specific upgrades, have great stat bonuses for certain builds, and are essential if you are looking to make a specific build in the game. In order to actually craft these gear sets, you'll need to find diagrams for these, usually through treasure hunt quests. You have to find blueprints for each part of a specific gear set one by one, and once you collect them all and find the right materials, you can craft any of them at a blacksmith or armorer. Yes, it definitely does take a little bit of effort, but it's absolutely worth it, and especially by the mid-game, I'd even call it essential. Now, as you journey across the game's expansive open world, you'll also come across runes and glyphs, which can be slotted into both your weapons and armor with empty sockets. They essentially give you small boosts like more Igni intensity or extra armor piercing. They are definitely minor boosts, but will help you round out your build for sure. One thing I also like to note is that as you kill monsters and other humans, your weapons, both the steel and silver ones, will wear down and you'll need to repair them at a blacksmith, so always keep that in mind as you stroll around the game's large open world. And that's it, pretty much all the tips and tricks I have for you this time. Of course, if you're stuck on anything in particular or want a bit more clarification on anything specific, feel free to let me know down below and I'll try my best to help you out. I tried to cover everything I thought would be important to know as a first time player to get the best of the experience without overloading you with information as well. Anyway, that's all from me for today's video. If you did enjoy, please consider subbing to the channel for more Witcher 3 and RPG content, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.